My name is Sloane, and am 32 years old. I was standing in my own living room when my parents told me to pack my bags and get out. My mother said the house belonged to my sister Gabrielle now, and my father nodded like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. Gabrielle stood behind them with her arms crossed, smirking like she'd already won. They had no idea I had every single receipt, every document, every piece of proof that this house was mine and mine alone. They thought they could bully me into handing over everything I'd worked for, but I was about to show them exactly how wrong they were. Before we dive into this absolute nightmare, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with entitled family members who thought they could take what's yours, hit that like button because you're going to want to see how this ends. Make sure you subscribe because this story has twists you won't believe, and trust me, the receipts I pulled out were legendary. Now, let's get into how my own family tried to steal my house right out from under me. Let me take you back 5 years to when I was 27 years old and absolutely determined to buy my own home. I worked 3 jobs to make it happen. And I mean that literally. Every morning at 5, I opened the coffee shop on Main Street, pulling espresso shots and serving breakfast sandwiches until noon. Then I'd rush across town to work as a receptionist at Dr. Palmer's dental office until 6 in the evening, answering phones and scheduling appointments while my feet ached in cheap dress shoes. Weekends were for freelance graphic design work, hunched over my laptop in my tiny apartment, creating logos and websites for small businesses who paid me just enough to keep my savings account growing. I did this for 6 years straight, starting when I was 26, because I had a goal and nothing was going to stop me. My parents, Mitchell and Dorothy, never believed I could actually pull it off. Every time I mentioned my house fund, my mother would pat my hand like I was a child playing pretend and say something like, "That's nice, dear, but real estate is so expensive. Maybe you should just keep renting." My father was worse. He'd launch into lectures about how I didn't understand money, how I was being irresponsible, how I should be more like my younger sister Gabrielle, who was, according to them, so smart and beautiful and charming that she didn't need to work herself to death. Gabrielle was 28 now, but back then she was 23 and had never held a job in her entire life. She lived at home in her childhood bedroom with the pink wallpaper, and our parents paid for absolutely everything, including her car, her credit cards, her spa appointments, and her weekly shopping trips. When I pointed out that maybe Gabrielle should contribute something to the household, my mother acted like I'd suggested something obscene. "Your sister is finding herself," she'd say, as if finding yourself required a Black American Express card and 0 responsibilities. The comparisons were constant and exhausting. At every family dinner, my father would talk about how Gabrielle had such refined taste, such natural elegance, such a gift for knowing what she wanted. What he actually meant was that Gabrielle was really good at spending their money and throwing tantrums when she didn't get her way. Meanwhile, I was grinding myself into dust at 3 jobs, eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week, and getting lectured about how I needed to be more ambitious. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but I kept my mouth shut and kept saving. Every paycheck got split the same way, 50% to savings, 30% to bills, 20% to everything else including food. I wore the same 5 outfits for 2 years. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. I said no to every invitation that cost money, every concert, every girls' trip, every brunch. My friends thought I was being extreme, but I had my eyes on the prize and nothing else mattered. After 6 years of this brutal routine, I finally had $48,000 saved for a down payment. I found a house that made my heart actually skip a beat when I walked through it for the first time. It was a small 3-bedroom craftsman in a decent neighborhood about 20 minutes from where my parents lived, with original hardwood floors, a brick fireplace, and a backyard big enough for the garden I'd always dreamed of planting. The house needed some cosmetic updates, but it was structurally sound and priced just barely within my budget. I put in an offer that same day, and when it was accepted, I cried in my car for 10 minutes straight. This was mine. I was doing this. Nobody was giving it to me or helping me or doing me any favors. I earned every single square foot of this place. The mortgage went under my name only. Not a cosigner in sight. Not a single dollar of help from anyone. My parents came to the closing because I foolishly thought they might be proud of me, but the entire time my father kept making these dismissive comments under his breath. This neighborhood will never appreciate and value. The house is too small for a real family. You overpaid, but I guess you'll learn. My mother spent the whole time on her phone texting Gabrielle, barely looking up when I signed the papers that changed my entire life. The real estate agent, a kind woman named Margot, noticed the tension and kept giving me these encouraging smiles like she was trying to make up for my parents' coldness. When I got the keys, I held them so tight the metal cut into my palm, and I didn't care. This was the best moment of my life, and I wasn't going to let my family's lack of enthusiasm ruin it. Move-in day was a solo operation because, of course it was. I rented a truck, loaded up my minimal furniture from my apartment, and spent 12 hours hauling boxes and assembling furniture until my back screamed and my hands were covered in blisters. I painted every room myself over the next month, rolling soft gray paint over the dingy beige walls until the place actually felt like home. I planted flowers in the front yard, installed shelves in the closets, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen sink by watching tutorial videos at 2 in the morning. My parents visited exactly once in the first year, stayed for 20 minutes, and spent the entire time pointing out everything they thought was wrong. The paint color was too dark, the furniture was too cheap, the neighborhood was too quiet. Gabrielle never came at all, claiming it was too far even though it was a 20-minute drive on a clear highway. She texted me once, asking if I had a pool, and when I said no, she wrote back, "Then why would I come over?" with a laughing emoji. That text stayed in my phone like a little knife, a reminder of exactly how much my family valued me. 2 years after I bought my house, Gabrielle got engaged to a man named Preston who worked in finance and drove a car that cost more than my annual salary. My parents were absolutely thrilled, acting like Gabrielle had won the lottery instead of just finding a boyfriend with a trust fund. The engagement party was this massive event at a country club that my parents paid for, dropping $20,000 on flowers and champagne and a string quartet. I was expected to be there in a dress I couldn't afford, smiling and congratulating my sister who hadn't worked a day in her life but was somehow being rewarded with a fairy tale wedding. Gabrielle spent the whole party showing off her ring, which was so big it looked like it would dislocate her finger, and talking about the destination wedding they were planning in Napa Valley. She picked me to be a bridesmaid, which sounds like an honor until you realize I was expected to pay for my own dress at $400, plus travel, plus a hotel room, plus a gift from the registry where the cheapest item was a set of napkins for $80. The wedding planning took over my parents' entire lives for the next year. Every Sunday dinner became a wedding strategy session where Gabrielle would show us fabric swatches and seating charts, while my mother cooed over every decision like Gabrielle was planning the coronation of a queen. My father wrote check after check, funding the photographer and the videographer and the cake that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Nobody asked me how I was doing or what was happening in my life because all that mattered was Gabrielle's big day. I sat at that table every week, smiling until my face hurt, wondering when someone would notice that I existed. 3 months before the wedding, everything fell apart in the most spectacular way possible. Preston got caught cheating with his executive assistant, and not just caught as in someone suspected something, but caught as in Gabrielle showed up at his apartment unannounced and found them together. The fallout was nuclear. Preston tried to apologize, sent flowers, wrote letters. But Gabrielle was done. And honestly, good for her on that one specific thing. My parents were absolutely furious, but not at Gabrielle for never noticing the red flags, or for choosing a man based solely on his bank account. No, they blamed Preston entirely, called him every name in the book, and decided that Gabrielle was the victim of a terrible man rather than someone who'd ignored obvious character flaws because he bought her expensive things. The wedding was called off, deposits were lost, and Gabrielle had a breakdown that lasted for weeks. She moved back into her childhood bedroom at age 26, which would have been fine except my parents immediately reverted to treating her like she was 12 years old. My mother brought her breakfast in bed every morning. My father canceled his golf games to sit with her while she watched reality TV and cried. Nobody expected her to get a job or contribute to the household or do literally anything except exist and be sad. I watched this from the outside, visiting for those increasingly awkward Sunday dinners, and felt like I was going insane. When I'd been heartbroken after my own breakup years earlier, my mother told me to get over it and stop being dramatic. But Gabrielle got the full princess treatment, complete with unlimited credit cards for retail therapy and zero expectations of recovery. Over the next year, my parents funded a series of business ideas that Gabrielle swore were going to make her independent and successful. First, there was the boutique where she was going to sell curated vintage clothing, which my parents funded with $15,000 for inventory and rent. It failed in 8 months because Gabrielle only wanted to stock clothes she personally liked, which turned out to be a very narrow market of overpriced items nobody wanted. Then came the jewelry line where she was going to design handmade pieces, which never actually launched because Gabrielle didn't want to learn how to make jewelry, and hiring someone to do it was too expensive. After that was the lifestyle blog where she was going to share fashion and travel tips, which peaked at 12 followers including family members and never made a single dollar. Each failure cost my parents thousands, and each time they just smiled and said she was learning and growing. Meanwhile, they asked me to loan them $5,000 for an emergency roof repair on their house, and I was stupid enough to say yes because they were my parents and I thought family helped each other. That money was never repaid, never mentioned again, and when I brought it up 6 months later, my father acted like I was being petty for keeping track. The first major violation happened on a Thursday evening when I came home from an especially long day at work. I pulled into my driveway at 6:30, exhausted and looking forward to heating up leftover pasta and watching something mindless on television. When I walked up to my front door, I noticed it was unlocked, which was strange because I was obsessive about locking up. I pushed the door open and heard music and laughter coming from my living room, and for a second, I thought I was being robbed, except robbers don't usually play pop music and giggle. I walked in to find my sister Gabrielle hosting a full girls' wine night in my house, with 4 of her friends sprawled across my furniture, drinking wine from my glasses and eating cheese off my cutting boards. There were bottles everywhere, someone's shoes kicked off by the door, and a dark red wine stain spreading across my beige carpet like a blood stain. I stood there completely frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Gabrielle looked up from the couch where she was holding court and waved at me like this was totally normal. "Oh, hey Sloan. We're just having a little get-together. Mom said I could use your place since you're always at work anyway." Her friends, none of whom I'd ever met, looked at me with mild annoyance like I was the one interrupting their party. One of them, a blonde woman in designer jeans, actually said, "Could you keep it down? We're trying to have a conversation." I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate dimension where my own home had been taken over by strangers, and I was somehow the problem. I demanded an explanation, my voice coming out sharper than I intended because I was too shocked to be polite. Gabrielle rolled her eyes and sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not a big deal. Your place is nicer than Mom and Dad's for parties, and you're never here anyway." "Don't be so uptight." Her friends nodded along, and I realized they genuinely thought I was being rude for objecting to this invasion. I asked how she even got in, and she held up a key, the spare key I'd left with my parents for actual emergencies, like if I got locked out or if something happened and someone needed to check on the house. My mother had given it to Gabrielle without asking me, without even mentioning it. Like my home security was just a casual thing she could redistribute. I told them they needed to leave immediately. Gabrielle laughed and said they weren't done with their party, that they'd leave when they were ready. Her friends looked at me like I was the crazy one, and one of them muttered something about family drama that I wasn't supposed to hear. I pulled out my phone and called my parents right there in front of everyone, putting it on speaker. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, and when I explained what was happening, she had the audacity to sound annoyed with me. "Oh, honey, don't be so selfish." Gabrielle needed cheering up, and she's been through so much with the Preston situation. It's just one night. Let her have this. My father got on the phone and backed her up, saying that family shares and I was being unreasonable for making such a big deal out of nothing. They refused to see this as a boundary violation. They refused to tell Gabrielle to leave. They acted like I was the villain in this situation for not wanting my home invaded and my belongings used without permission. After 20 minutes of arguing, while Gabrielle and her friends helped themselves to more of my wine, I gave up on getting support from my parents. I told everyone to get out, and when Gabrielle refused, I made it clear I would call the police. That finally got them moving, but they took their time, gathering their things and making comments about how dramatic I was being. The wine stain on my carpet stayed there as a reminder, and no matter how much I scrubbed it that night, I could never get it completely out. The next day, I spent $240 getting my locks changed because I couldn't trust that my parents wouldn't just hand out keys again. When my parents found out, they were furious with me for locking family out of my house. My mother called crying, saying I was breaking her heart and treating them like criminals. My father said I was being paranoid and cruel. Gabrielle posted on social media about how her sister hated her and wouldn't even let her visit, painting herself as the victim while carefully leaving out the part where Shed invaded my home and destroyed my property. Sunday dinners became these tense, awful events where everyone glared at me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin, and I started dreading them so much I felt sick every Saturday night. 2 months after the wine night incident, my parents called me with a request that should have been a red flag the size of a house. They needed Gabrielle to stay with me for a few weeks because they were having their house fumigated for termites. My father explained it in this casual way, like he was asking me to water their plants, not take in a whole adult human who'd already proven she had no respect for my space or boundaries. I was immediately suspicious because my parents' house was only 15 years old and well-maintained. But my mother started crying on the phone about how they had nowhere else to turn, and Gabrielle couldn't stay in a hotel for that long because it would be too expensive. The guilt trip was heavy and effective, and like an idiot, I agreed to 2 weeks maximum. Gabrielle showed up at my door with 6 massive suitcases, like she was moving in permanently, not staying for 2 weeks. She pushed past me into the house, surveyed the space like she was evaluating a hotel, and immediately announced she'd be taking the master bedroom because she needed more space for her stuff. I tried to object, pointing out that this was my house and my bedroom, but she was already dragging her luggage down the hall. "You can take the guest room," she called over her shoulder. "It's not like you need that much space anyway." I stood there with my mouth open, unable to believe this was actually happening, but too exhausted from work and life to fight about it right then. Living with Gabrielle was like having a demanding teenager who'd never learned basic life skills. She expected me to cook for her, leaving the kitchen a disaster after making herself snacks and never cleaning up. She'd pile her laundry in the hallway and act surprised when I didn't wash it for her. She took 45-minute showers that drained the hot water and cranked the air conditioning so high my electric bill doubled. Worse, she invited her boyfriend Jackson to stay over without ever asking my permission. I came home one night to find this guy I'd never met, eating cereal out of my last clean bowl, wearing my bathrobe, sprawled on my couch like he owned the place. Jackson was unemployed, called himself a musician even though he didn't seem to play any actual music, and had this entitled attitude that made my skin crawl. He ate everything in my refrigerator, left dirty dishes everywhere, and talked to me like I was interrupting his life by existing in my own home. 2 weeks came and went, with no mention of Gabrielle leaving. Every time I brought it up, she'd say she just needed a few more days, that the fumigation was taking longer than expected, that she'd be out of my hair soon. My parents backed her up every single time I called them, telling me not to be cruel and asking where else she was supposed to go. 3 weeks turned into 4, then 5, then 6. I felt like a hostage in my own home, walking on eggshells and trying not to start World War III every time Gabrielle did something inconsiderate. The financial impact was crushing. She never offered a single dollar for rent, utilities, or groceries. My electric bill went from $120 a month to $280. My grocery bills doubled because Jackson ate like he was preparing for hibernation. Then I discovered that Gabrielle had been ordering takeout on my food delivery apps, which were still logged in on my tablet, charging everything to my credit card without asking. Over 6 weeks, she racked up approximately $1,200 in expenses that I was covering while working my 3 jobs and trying to keep my head above water. Finally, I reached my breaking point. I sat Gabrielle down and told her she needed to leave, that I'd given her far more time than I'd agreed to, and I needed my space back. She stared at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat, genuinely confused about why this was a problem. When I held firm, she ran to our parents crying about how I was throwing her out on the street. Within 2 hours, my parents showed up at my house unannounced, barging in and immediately starting to scream at me. My father got in my face, calling me selfish and heartless. My mother cried about how Shed raised me better than this. How could I treat my own sister this way? They acted like I was committing some unforgivable crime by wanting my house back after 6 weeks of being taken advantage of. I showed them the credit card charges, the utility bills, all the proof of how much this was costing me, and they dismissed it as no big deal, saying family doesn't keep score. When they finally left, taking a sobbing Gabrielle with them, I sat on my floor and cried for an hour straight. Not because I felt guilty, but because I'd just gotten a crystal clear picture of how little they cared about me or my well-being. That night, I discovered the real kicker when I was venting to my neighbor Gwendolyn, an older woman who'd lived on the street for 30 years. She mentioned she'd never seen a fumigation tent on my parents' house, and when I checked with the local pest control companies, none of them had any record of service at that address. The fumigation was a complete lie. My parents had invented a fake emergency to guilt me into taking in Gabrielle, and they'd all kept up the deception for 6 weeks while bleeding me dry financially and emotionally. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just favoritism or poor boundaries anymore. This was calculated manipulation, and it was about to get so much worse. 1 month after I'd finally gotten Gabrielle out of my house, my mother called and invited me to a family dinner at their place. She used this sweet voice, the one she reserved for when she wanted something, and said they just wanted to spend time with me and work on repairing our relationship. I was skeptical, but some pathetic part of me still wanted my parents to actually care about me, so I agreed. I showed up at their house on Sunday evening, dressed nicely. Carrying a bottle of wine like this was a normal family gathering. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. Gabrielle was there, which I'd expected, but so were 3 of my parents, friends, couples I vaguely recognized from their social circle. They were all sitting in the living room with these serious expressions, and the whole setup felt like an intervention. My father gestured for me to sit down in the chair they'd positioned in the center of the room, facing everyone else like I was on trial. My stomach dropped. Mitchell cleared his throat and announced that we needed to have a serious talk about my house. For a second, I thought maybe they were going to apologize for the Gabrielle situation, acknowledge how badly they'd treated me. Instead, my father said, "We've made a decision as a family. Gabrielle should have your house." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually laughed because surely this was a joke, some kind of weird test, but nobody else was laughing. My mother nodded supportively while Gabrielle sat there looking smug and victorious. My father continued explaining their reasoning like he was presenting a business case. Gabrielle needed the house more than I did because she was struggling, and I was successful. I could find another place because I had a good job and stability, while Gabrielle needed security and a fresh start. They kept using words like fair and family, and helping each other. But what they were really saying was that my 6 years of sacrifice and hard work meant nothing, because Gabrielle wanted what I had. My mother pulled out a document, an actual printed document, that they wanted me to sign. It was an agreement transferring the deed of my house to Gabrielle, written in legal-sounding language that they'd clearly spent time preparing. They slid it across the coffee table toward me with a pen, expecting me to just sign away my home like it was nothing. I asked if this was a joke, my voice shaking. Mitchell's face hardened, and he said they were completely serious, that this was the right thing to do. Dorothy chimed in, saying that Gabrielle deserved stability and I should want to help my sister. Their friends sat there nodding along like this made perfect sense, like asking someone to hand over their home was a reasonable family request. Gabrielle played her part perfectly, dabbing at fake tears and talking about how she just needed a fresh start and this would mean so much to her. She even had the audacity to say, "I'll take really good care of it, I promise." Like I was lending her a sweater and not signing over the biggest investment of my life. I refused. I said absolutely not, that the house was mine. I paid for it, and there was no universe in which I would give it to Gabrielle. The room erupted. My father's face turned red and he started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how they'd helped me with advice when I bought the house, and this was how I repaid them. That was a complete lie. They'd given me nothing but criticism and discouragement, but now they were rewriting history to justify their demands. My mother cried and said she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd become cold and selfish. Their friends looked at me with disappointment. These people who didn't know me at all but had been brought in to pressure me through sheer numbers. When it became clear I wasn't going to budge, my father dropped the friendly pretense entirely and made it a threat. He said if I didn't sign the document voluntarily, they'd have to do this the hard way. He claimed they were going to sue me for financial elder abuse, which was such an insane accusation I almost laughed again. He said I'd manipulated them into co-signing my mortgage, which had never happened because my name was the only one on any document. He threatened to report me to the police for stealing family money, referencing the $5,000 they'd borrowed from me and never repaid as if I were somehow the thief in that situation. Dorothy backed him up, adding that they'd tell everyone we knew what kind of person I really was, that they'd make sure my reputation was destroyed. I left that house shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. My entire family, the people who were supposed to love and support me, had just tried to bully me into giving up my home. They'd planned this ambush, prepared documents, brought in witnesses to pressure me, and when that didn't work, they'd threatened legal action and social destruction. I realized with horrible clarity that they'd do whatever it took to get what they wanted, and what they wanted was to take everything I'd earned and give it to Gabrielle on a silver platter. I drove home that night knowing that this was war, and I needed to be ready for whatever they threw at me next. I spent the entire weekend after that nightmare dinner gathering every single piece of evidence that proved my house was mine and mine alone. I barely slept, running on coffee and righteous anger, pulling documents from filing cabinets and downloading bank statements until my eyes burned. I created a 3-ring binder with colored tabs separating different sections, the kind of organization that would make a lawyer weep with joy. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about having ammunition for the battle I knew was coming, and I was going to make sure I had enough firepower to end this fight permanently. Section 1 was labeled Proof of Purchase in bold letters, and it contained every document related to buying the house. The original mortgage papers had my name and only my name on every single page, which I highlighted in bright yellow so nobody could miss it. The deed was there too, official and legal with raised seals, showing Sloane Margaret Hayes as the sole owner of the property with absolutely no co-signers or co-owners listed anywhere. I included 6 years of bank statements, showing my savings account growing month by month, deposits from all 3 jobs slowly accumulating into that $48,000 down payment. Every statement was highlighted to show the deposits coming from my accounts only, my income only, my sacrifice only. I added the closing documents with my signature on every required line, the home insurance policy that listed me as the sole policyholder, and even the inspection report that ID paid for out of pocket. This section alone was 50 pages thick, and it was absolutely bulletproof. Section 2 documented every single payment I'd made on the house over 5 years. I printed out mortgage payment records, showing 60 months of on-time payments from my checking account, never late, never missed, never subsidized by anyone. Property tax payments were all there, totaling thousands of dollars that came straight from my account twice a year. I included HOA fees, homeowners insurance premiums, utility bills, spanning 5 years with my name on every single one. Then came the home repair receipts, because owning a house means constant maintenance that costs real money. There was the roof work from year 2 when some shingles blew off in a storm, $3,200. The plumbing repair when the main line backed up, $1,800. The HVAC servicing I paid for every spring and fall, about $400 each time. I added it all up with a calculator, writing the total at the top of the section in red ink. Approximately $230,000 invested in this house over 5 years, every penny coming from my own labor and income. Section 3 was my evidence of Gabrielle's abuse and my parents' complicity, and putting this together made me so angry I had to take breaks to calm down. I'd saved the receipts from the food delivery apps that Gabrielle had used with my credit card, organizing them by date with the total amount highlighted. $1,163.47 worth of sushi, Thai food, pizza, and fancy desserts that Shed charged to my account without permission. I printed screenshots showing the orders were delivered to my address during the 6 weeks Shed been staying with me. I included photos I'd taken of the wine-stained carpet from her unauthorized party, the stains still visible even after professional cleaning that cost me another $200. I had text message screenshots where my parents demanded I let Gabrielle stay with me, their words preserved forever, showing exactly how they'd pressured and manipulated me. Bank records proved the $5,000 loan ID given them for the fake roof repair, with a note ID written to myself documenting their promise to repay me within 3 months. That was 2 years ago now, and I'd never seen a cent of it. Section 4 was what I called character evidence, and it was devastating. I'd gone through Gabrielle's social media and taken screenshots of every post that revealed her true attitude toward my house and my boundaries. There was a photo Shed posted of herself lounging on my couch with the caption "relaxing at my vacation house" and a bunch of cocktail emojis. Another post showed her in my master bedroom, taking a mirror selfie with the caption "might have to move in permanently. This place is amazing." I found posts where Shed tagged her location as my address and talked about how her sister's place was basically hers to use whenever she wanted. Her friends had commented asking if it was her house, and Shed responded with things like, "Might as well be, and what's hers is mine. That's what family means." I also included screenshots of a conversation in a Facebook group where Shed complained about me to mutual acquaintances, calling me stingy and mean for asking her to leave after 6 weeks, painting herself as a victim while carefully leaving out every way Shed taken advantage of me. On Monday morning, I took a personal day from work and met with an attorney named Franklin Hayes, who specialized in property law and family disputes. I'd found him through an online search, reading reviews from other clients who'd dealt with relatives trying to steal property or force sales. Franklin was in his 50s, calm and professional, with the kind of steady demeanor that made you feel like everything would be okay. I sat in his office with my massive binder and walked him through the entire situation, watching his eyebrows climb higher with each new revelation. When I finished, he sat back in his leather chair and said, "Miss Hayes, you have one of the most airtight cases I've ever seen. Your family has absolutely zero legal claim to your property. Not even a fraction of a percent." Franklin reviewed every document carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. He confirmed that my mortgage and deed were perfect, that my payment history proved consistent ownership, and that my parents' threats of suing for elder abuse or claiming they'd co-signed were completely without merit. He said if they actually tried to file such a lawsuit, it would be thrown out immediately, and they could potentially face sanctions for filing frivolous claims. The evidence of Gabrielle's theft via the food delivery charges was clear-cut, and if I wanted to pursue it, I could file a police report and potentially press charges. He advised me to document everything going forward, to save every text message and email, to record conversations if it was legal in my state, which it was with single-party consent. He prepared a cease and desist letter template that I could send if the harassment continued, and he had restraining order paperwork ready to file if my family tried to trespass or threaten me again. Walking out of Franklin's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: power. I had the truth on my side. I had documentation that would stand up in any court, and I had a lawyer who'd confirmed that my family's threats were empty bluster designed to scare me into compliance. They'd counted on me being too intimidated or too desperate for their approval to fight back. They'd miscalculated badly. I went home and added Franklin's business card to the front of my binder, along with a copy of the consultation notes Head given me. I put the binder in my fireproof safe along with the original deed and mortgage documents. Then I made 3 copies of everything, storing one at work, one in a safe deposit box at my bank, and one with my friend Laurel, who I trusted completely. If my family wanted to play games, I was ready. And I had receipts for days. 2 weeks after my meeting with Franklin, I came home from work on a Thursday evening around 6, looking forward to a quiet night after a stressful day dealing with demanding clients. When I turned onto my street, I saw my parents' car parked in my driveway, along with a massive moving truck idling at the curb. My heart started pounding before my brain even fully processed what I was seeing. I parked on the street and walked up to my house with my keys in my hand, and that's when I noticed my front door was standing wide open. I'd locked it that morning. I was obsessive about locking it. Someone had gotten inside, and I had a horrible feeling I knew exactly who. I walked through my front door into absolute chaos. Mitchell and Dorothy were directing 2 moving men who were loading my belongings into boxes. Gabrielle was standing in the middle of my living room with a clipboard, pointing at furniture and telling the movers what stayed and what went. My couch, the one I'd saved for 3 months to buy, had a piece of tape on it that said, "Stays." My grandmother's antique side table, the only thing I owned with sentimental value, was wrapped in moving blankets by the door ready to be loaded. Boxes were everywhere, some already sealed and labeled with Sloane's stuff written in Gabrielle's handwriting. They were packing up my life, removing me from my own home, and they were doing it like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stood there frozen for about 5 seconds before my voice came back. "What the hell is going on?" My mother turned around, and I swear she looked annoyed that I'd interrupted them. "Oh, Sloane, you're home early. We're helping Gabrielle move in. We told you the house is hers now, so we thought we'd help you with the transition." She said it so casually, like they were doing me a favor by packing my belongings without permission. My father walked over with his arms crossed, using his intimidation posture that had scared me when I was a child but just made me angry now. "We're being nice by packing for you. You have until Sunday to find a new place. That should be plenty of time for someone so independent and capable." The sarcasm in his voice was thick enough to choke on. Gabrielle stood behind them looking absolutely triumphant, like she'd already won. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Sloane. Just accept that this is happening and move on. You'll find another place. You're good at that kind of thing." She waved her hand dismissively, and I noticed she was wearing one of my necklaces, a delicate silver piece I'd bought myself as a gift when I got promoted last year. She'd just helped herself to my jewelry while packing up my house. The entitlement was so staggering I almost couldn't process it. These people had broken into my home, were actively stealing my property, and they genuinely believed they had the right to do this. I pulled out my phone and very deliberately started recording video, making sure I captured everyone's faces and the scene around me. "This is my house. You are trespassing. I need all of you to leave immediately." My voice was shaking, but I kept the phone steady. My father's face turned red, the way it always did when someone challenged him. "We're not leaving. We're family. You can't kick us out. This is a family matter." My mother jumped in with her manipulation tactics, her voice getting high and weepy. "If you call the police, we'll tell them you're mentally unstable. We'll tell them you've been threatening us. They'll believe us over you." It was a bluff, but it was also a threat, and they'd clearly planned this out together. The moving men had stopped working and were standing awkwardly by my bookshelf, clearly uncomfortable with the situation they'd been pulled into. I turned to them and pulled up the deed to my house on my phone, the PDF I kept saved for exactly this kind of emergency. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. These people do not have permission to be here or to remove anything." One of the movers, a younger guy with a sleeve of tattoos, looked at the phone and then at my parents. "Wait, this is your house? Like legally your house?" I nodded, and he looked at his partner with this expression of dawning horror. They'd been hired to help with what they thought was a legitimate move, and they'd just realized they were participating in theft. Mitchell tried to recover, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "She's confused. We own this house. We bought it for her." It was such a blatant lie that even the movers looked skeptical. I pulled up my mortgage documents, my bank statements, everything Eid prepared. "Show them your ownership documents then. Show them any proof that you have any legal right to this property." My father couldn't, of course, because no such documents existed. The movers looked at each other and the tattooed one said, "We need to see legal proof of ownership before we continue. If you can't provide that, we're leaving." Mitchell sputtered and tried to bluster his way through, but when he couldn't produce a single piece of paper with his name on it, the movers started backing toward the door. They left within 2 minutes, refusing to be part of whatever family drama had sucked them in. My parents doubled down instead of backing off. Dorothy sat down on my couch and crossed her arms. "We're not leaving. You'll have to drag us out." Gabrielle had already disappeared into the master bedroom, and I could hear her opening drawers and moving things around. She was unpacking her suitcases, literally moving into my bedroom while I stood in the living room trying to process the insanity. My father positioned himself in front of the door like he was guarding it, and my mother pulled out her phone and started texting, probably sending messages to relatives with some twisted version of events that painted me as the villain. I looked at my parents sitting in my house, refusing to leave, believing that their sense of entitlement overrode the law, property rights, and basic human decency. I looked at the boxes they'd packed with my belongings, at the tape marking my furniture for removal, at the absolute chaos they'd created in my sanctuary. And I made the call I'd been avoiding because some part of me still couldn't believe my own parents would force me to do this. I dialed 911, and when the dispatcher answered, I said clearly and calmly, "I need police to respond to my home. My family is trespassing and refusing to leave. They've broken in and are attempting to steal my property." My mother gasped like Id struck her. My father's face went from red to purple, and Gabrielle came running out of the bedroom screaming that I'd regret this. But I didn't hang up, and I didn't back down. The police were coming, and my family was about to learn a very expensive lesson about property rights. The police arrived within 12 minutes, which felt like 12 hours while my parents sat on my couch refusing to move, and Gabrielle paced around muttering threats under her breath. I stayed by the front door with my phone still recording everything, documenting my father's attempts to physically intimidate me by standing too close, and my mother's theatrical crying. When I heard the sirens and saw the lights outside, I felt this wave of relief so intense my knees almost buckled. 2 officers came to the door. A tall woman named Officer Brennan with sharp eyes that took in the entire scene immediately, and her partner Officer Hayes, an older man with gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. My parents immediately launched into victim mode the second the officers walked in. Dorothy jumped up from the couch with tears streaming down her face, running over to Officer Brennan like she was seeking protection. "Officer, thank God you're here. Our daughter is having a breakdown. She's not thinking clearly. This is our house, and she's trying to throw us out. She was good. I had to give her that." The tears looked real and her voice shook with exactly the right amount of distress. My father backed her up, moving toward Officer Hayes with his hands out in this reasonable, concerned parent gesture. "We're just trying to help our daughters resolve a property dispute. We own this house and we're transferring it to our younger daughter Gabrielle, but Sloane has always been unstable, and she's refusing to accept reality." Gabrielle positioned herself between my parents, playing the role of worried sister perfectly. "She's been acting strange for months. We think she's having some kind of mental health crisis. She's been stealing from our parents for years, and now she's claiming their house is hers. We're just trying to get back what's ours." She looked at the officers with these big, sad eyes, and I could see her strategy clearly. Make me look crazy, make them look like concerned family members, turn the police against me before I even had a chance to present evidence. It was a good plan. It almost might have worked if I hadn't prepared for exactly this scenario. I stepped forward calmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Officers, everything they just told you is a lie. This is my house. I own it. I have documentation. I'd kept my 3-ring binder in my car after my meeting with Franklin, paranoid that my family might try something exactly like this. I retrieved it now, along with my laptop, and handed the binder to Officer Brennan. This contains the deed to the property with my name as the sole owner, my mortgage documents, 5 years of payment history, and evidence that these people have been harassing me and attempting to force me to sign over my property. Officer Brennan opened the binder while Officer Hayes moved to a position where he could watch everyone in the room. His hand rested casually near his belt, and I realized he was making sure nobody tried anything stupid. Officer Brennan flipped through the deed, her eyes scanning the legal language and the highlighted sections where my name appeared as sole owner. She looked at my parents, then at Gabrielle, then back at the document. "Sir, ma'am, do you have any ownership documents for this property?" Mitchell puffed up, trying to maintain his authority. "It's complicated. We helped her buy it. We gave her advice and support. She wouldn't have this house without us." It was such a weak claim that even he seemed to realize how pathetic it sounded. Officer Brennan's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked. Do you have any legal ownership documents? Your name's on the deed, mortgage papers, anything that establishes you have a right to be here." The silence was deafening. Dorothy tried to cry harder, but Officer Brennan wasn't buying it. My father tried to bluster about family contributions and moral obligations, but Officer Hayes cut him off. "That's a no then. Mom, can you show me your payment history?" I pulled up my online banking on my laptop, showing 60 months of mortgage payments, every single one coming from my account. I showed property tax payments, insurance payments, utility bills spanning 5 years with my name on them. Officer Brennan compared everything against the deed and the mortgage documents, and I could see the exact moment she realized my family had zero legal ground to stand on. She turned to Gabrielle, her voice professional but firm. "Mom, do you have any proof you live here? A lease agreement, mail addressed to you at this location, anything." Gabrielle's smugness faltered. "I changed my mailing address to here. I was planning to move in today. That makes it my residence." Officer Hayes shook his head. "Changing your mailing address doesn't establish legal residence." "Do you have the owner's permission to live here?" Gabrielle pointed at me accusingly. "She's my sister. I shouldn't need permission. Family shares." Officer Hayes looked like he'd heard this argument 1,000 times before and was tired of it. "This is her property. You need her permission. Do you have her permission to be here right now?" The trap snapped shut. Gabrielle couldn't say yes because I'd literally called the police to remove them. She tried to pivot to emotion, talking about how I was cruel and vindictive, how she deserved this house more than I did, how our parents had decided she should have it. Officer Brennan held up her hand, cutting off the rant. "What you deserve and what you're legally entitled to are 2 different things. This property belongs to Miss Hayes according to every legal document we've reviewed. You are trespassing." The word hung in the air like a bomb. Trespassing. Criminal trespassing in my own home by my own family. Mitchell tried one more time to control the situation, his voice getting aggressive. "This is family business. You can't arrest us for trying to help our daughter. This is ridiculous." Officer Brennan's patience was clearly running out. "Sir, this is not family business. This is a property crime. You have broken into someone's home and attempted to remove their possessions without permission. You need to leave immediately, or you will be arrested for criminal trespassing." She said it so matter-of-factly that even my father couldn't argue. Though he tried, Officer Hayes moved toward him, and something about a 6-foot-tall police officer approaching made my father finally realize he'd lost this battle. But I wasn't done. I'd been keeping one more piece of evidence in reserve, and now was the time to use it. "Officers, I also have documentation that Gabrielle stole approximately $1,200 from me by charging food delivery to my credit card without permission while she was staying here. I have receipts and bank statements if you'd like to see them." I pulled out the section of my binder dedicated to the theft, showing the highlighted charges and the evidence that Gabrielle had been the one placing the orders. Officer Brennan looked at Gabrielle, whose face had gone pale. "Is this true?" Gabrielle stammered something about how Id said she could order food, which was a complete lie, and I had text messages proving Id told her she needed to pay for her own food. Officer Brennan pulled out a trespassing warning form and filled it out while Officer Hayes kept watch over my increasingly panicked family. The warning was official and legal, documenting that Mitchell, Dorothy, and Gabrielle were banned from my property, and any return would result in immediate arrest. Officer Brennan handed my father the form and explained it in detail, making sure he understood that this wasn't a suggestion or a request, it was a legal order. She also gave me a case number and told me I could file additional charges for the theft if I wanted to pursue it. I said I'd think about it, which was code for keeping this in reserve in case they try anything else. My parents and Gabrielle were forced to leave, walking out my front door while neighbors stood in their yards watching the spectacle. Gabrielle was still screaming, saying this wasn't over, that I'd regret this, that I'd pay for humiliating her. My father said I was dead to them, that I'd never see them again, that they'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. My mother just cried, but they were angry tears now instead of manipulative ones. I stood in my doorway with both officers behind me, watching my family drive away. And, for the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. Officer Brennan handed me her card and told me to call immediately if they came back or tried to contact me. Officer Hayes told me I'd done everything right by documenting everything and staying calm. They left, and I stood in my messy, violated house surrounded by half-packed boxes, and I smiled, because I'd won. The receipts had saved me, and my family finally knew they couldn't bully me into giving up what was mine. The first thing I did after the police left was change my locks for the third time, getting the most expensive high-security deadbolts I could find, and having them professionally installed the next morning. Then I spent an entire weekend installing security cameras, 4 on the outside, covering every entrance, and 2 inside aimed at the doors. I wasn't taking any chances that my family might decide the police warning didn't apply to them. The house felt violated, contaminated by their presence and their attempt to steal it from me, so I deep-cleaned everything they'd touched. I washed every surface, vacuumed every carpet, scrubbed the bathroom until my hands were raw. I was washing away their presence, reclaiming my space as mine and mine alone. The smear campaign started within 24 hours, exactly like I'd predicted. My parents called every aunt, uncle, and cousin we had, spinning an elaborate fiction about how I'd stolen the house from Gabrielle. According to their version, Gabrielle had paid for the entire house with her inheritance from our grandmother, but I'd manipulated the paperwork to put my name on everything and then kicked her out when she tried to move in. It was such an absurd lie that anyone with half a brain would question it, but family loyalty is a powerful thing, and some of our relatives chose to believe my parents without asking for my side of the story. My Aunt Regina stopped returning my calls. My Uncle Terence blocked me on social media. Cousins I'd grown up with sent me angry messages about how disgusted they were with my behavior. I didn't engage with the lies directly because I'd learned that arguing with people who'd already made up their minds was pointless. Instead, I created a detailed email with the subject line, "The Truth About My House," and sent it to every relative who'd been fed my parents' lies. I attached PDFs of the deed, the mortgage documents, bank statements showing my down payment and 5 years of payments, photos of Gabrielle's social media posts about using my house, copies of the police report from the trespassing incident, and receipts proving sheds stolen from me. I kept the email factual and unemotional, letting the evidence speak for itself. Within a week, several relatives reached out to apologize, admitting they'd been misled and asking if I was okay. Some of them even stopped speaking to my parents once they realized the extent of the manipulation. But there were others who doubled down, choosing to maintain their relationship with my parents even after seeing proof of the lies. I let those relationships go without guilt because anyone who'd choose convenient fiction over documented truth wasn't someone I needed in my life. Gabrielle wasn't done trying to play victim. She created a GoFundMe page titled, "Homeless Because My Cruel Sister Stole My House," with this heartbreaking story about how Shed invested her entire savings in a home that I'd stolen through legal manipulation. She used photos of my house from when Shed stayed there, making it look like it had been hers all along. The page raised about $400 before I discovered it and reported it to GoFundMe for fraud, attaching the same evidence I'd sent to my relatives. The fundraiser was shut down within 48 hours and the money was refunded to donors, but Gabrielle had already posted about it all over social media, generating sympathy from people who didn't know the real story. Her friends rallied around her in the comments until some mutual acquaintances who knew the truth started calling her out, asking why she'd been charging takeout to my credit card if she'd supposedly paid for the house. The whole thing unraveled publicly, and Gabrielle ended up deleting most of her social media accounts out of embarrassment. 1 month after the police incident, I received a letter from a lawyer my father had apparently hired, claiming I owed my parents $50,000 for unspecified financial contributions to my house. The letter was full of legal-sounding language, but completely devoid of any actual evidence or specific claims about what these contributions were supposed to be. I forwarded it to Franklin, who responded on my behalf with a letter that was basically a professional version of "Prove It or Shut Up." He included copies of all my evidence showing I'd purchased and maintained the house entirely on my own, and he added a paragraph threatening to file a defamation lawsuit if they continued making false claims about my property. That was the last I heard from them legally. They finally understood that every avenue they tried to pursue just generated more documentation of their harassment, and they had no evidence to support any of their claims. The emotional recovery took longer than the legal one. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Celeste Hartman, who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic family dynamics. In our sessions, she helped me understand the patterns that had been present my entire life but that had been too close to see clearly. My parents had always positioned Gabrielle as the golden child who could do no wrong, and me as the scapegoat who existed to serve the family's needs. Everything I achieved was minimized or ignored, while everything Gabrielle wanted was provided immediately. The house situation was just the most extreme example of a dynamic that had been crushing me for decades. Dr. Hartman taught me that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation, and that I didn't owe my family unlimited access to my life, my resources, or my property just because we shared DNA. I started building a chosen family that actually felt like family. My best friend Laurel had stood by me through the entire nightmare, storing copies of my documents and offering to testify if I needed her. She became like the sister I'd always wished I had, someone who celebrated my successes instead of resenting them. My work colleague Reed and his wife Tessa started inviting me to their holiday gatherings, including me in their traditions and treating me like part of their family without any expectation of repayment or subservience. My elderly neighbor Gwendolyn became a surrogate grandmother, the kind who was actually interested in my life and proud of what I'd accomplished. We'd have tea in her garden and she'd tell me stories about raising her kids as a single mother in the 1960s, working 3 jobs just like I had, and she understood my journey in a way my own parents never could. Financially, I finally started thriving once I wasn't constantly being drained by my family. The $5,000 they'd borrowed and never repaid would have been nice to have back, but it was worth it to know I'd never loan them another cent. Without Gabrielle's theft, and without my parents' constant requests for money to fund her failed business ventures, I was able to save aggressively again. I paid off a huge chunk of my mortgage with the money I'd been setting aside, reducing my monthly payment and the total interest I'd pay over the life of the loan. I renovated my kitchen with $12,000 I'd saved, installing the kind of cabinets and countertops I'd dreamed about since buying the place. When I had the house appraised for insurance purposes, I found out it had appreciated 40% since I'd bought it 5 years ago. That profit, that equity, it was all mine. Every dollar of appreciation belonged to me because I'd taken the risk, done the work, and protected my investment from people who wanted to take it without earning it. The lessons I learned from this nightmare became the foundation of how I approached every relationship going forward. I learned that blood doesn't mean unconditional access to your life, your home, or your resources. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's a necessary act of self-preservation that healthy people respect and toxic people reject. I learned that my parents had raised me to believe I owed them everything, my success, my possessions, my compliance, but the truth was I owed them nothing. They'd given me life, but I'd built my life on my own through sacrifice and determination while they actively tried to undermine me. I learned that Gabrielle had been taught she deserved everything without earning it, that the world existed to give her what she wanted, and that reality was eventually going to come for her in ways that wouldn't be pretty. The receipts weren't just paper. They were proof that I'd built my life with my own hands, my own money, my own stubborn refusal to give up even when my own family tried to crush me. Every mortgage statement, every utility bill, every bank record showing deposits from my 3 jobs, they all told a story of a woman who wanted something so badly she was willing to sacrifice everything to get it. My parents and Gabrielle had thought they could rewrite that story, erase my work, and claim my success as something they were entitled to. But paper doesn't lie. Numbers don't have loyalty. The truth was documented in ways that no amount of manipulation could overcome, and that truth had saved me. My life now is unrecognizable compared to those dark months when my family was actively trying to destroy me. I got promoted to senior graphic designer at my firm, finally down to just 1 job instead of 3, because I was making enough to live comfortably. I started dating a man named Elliot, who teaches high school history and is the kindest person I've ever met. When I told him the whole story about my family on our 5th date, expecting him to run for the hills, he just held my hand and said, "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and they're idiots for not seeing that." He respects my boundaries, never pushes me to reconcile with my family, and understands that the family you choose is often better than the family you're born into. We've been together for 8 months now, and he's never once made me feel like I owe him anything or like my success threatens him. That alone feels like a miracle. I host dinner parties at my house now, the house that's truly mine, inviting friends who actually want to be there and who bring wine instead of entitlement. My garden is blooming with tomatoes and herbs and flowers, a physical manifestation of growth and life that I tend with the same dedication I gave to saving for this place. Every time I sit on my back patio with coffee in the morning, I think about how close I came to losing this. How my family almost bullied me into signing it away, how they broke in and tried to physically remove me, how they were so convinced that their wants mattered more than my rights. And then I think about how I fought back with nothing but the truth and the receipts to prove it. 6 months after the police incident, I ran into Gabrielle at the grocery store. I was in the produce section picking out apples when I looked up and saw her standing by the bananas, staring at me. She looked rough, like life hadn't been kind since I'd destroyed her plan to steal my house. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, shed gained weight, and her clothes were wrinkled in a way that suggested she wasn't taking care of herself. For a second, we just stared at each other across the produce displays. Then she started walking toward me with this desperate look on her face, and I knew she was about to try to talk to me, maybe apologize, or more likely try another manipulation tactic. Before she could get close enough to speak, I said clearly and firmly, "No, I have nothing to say to you." Then I turned my back on her and walked away without looking back. It felt powerful. It felt right. It felt like closing a door that should have been closed years ago. Some people will always believe they're entitled to what you've earned. Your success will threaten those who never tried, and they'll spend more energy trying to tear you down than they ever would building themselves up. The world is full of people like my parents and Gabrielle. People who think wanting something means deserving it. Who think family obligation means unlimited access to everything you have. But here's what I learned. Keep your receipts, keep your boundaries, and keep your peace. Document everything because paper trails don't lie and judges don't care about your parents' feelings. Stand firm when people try to guilt you into giving up what's yours because guilt is just a tool manipulators use when logic fails them. And know that walking away from toxic family isn't cruelty, it's survival. I don't hate my family. Hate requires energy and emotion that I don't have to spare for them anymore. I just don't have room for them in the life I built. They made their choices when they decided Gabrielle's wants mattered more than my rights. when they broke into my home, when they threatened to destroy my reputation if I didn't hand over my house. Those choices have consequences, and one consequence is that they don't get access to me or my life anymore. They're strangers now. People I used to know who showed me exactly who they were when I finally refused to be their doormat. I believe them now in ways I never did before, and that belief means keeping them at a distance where they can't hurt me. This house isn't just walls and a roof and a mortgage payment. It's proof that I survived them. Every room represents a sacrifice I made, a job I worked, a night I stayed home instead of going out because I was saving for something bigger. The kitchen renovation represents freedom from their financial drain. The security cameras represent learning from experience and protecting what's mine. The garden represents growth after trauma, beauty after ugliness, life continuing despite everything. And every single mortgage payment I make, watching that principal balance drop month after month, it's a reminder that I won. So here's my message to anyone watching this who's dealing with entitled family members, toxic parents, or siblings who think your success is theirs to claim. Document everything. Keep receipts. Take screenshots. Save emails. Record conversations if it's legal where you live. Build your evidence binder before you need it, because you probably will need it. Get a lawyer who specializes in property law if your family starts making threats. Install security cameras, and change your locks if you feel unsafe. And most importantly, know that you're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even if those people raised you, especially if those people raised you. Your boundaries are valid. Your property is yours. Your success is yours. And if your family can't respect that, then the problem isn't you being selfish, it's them being entitled. Stand your ground. Present your receipts. And watch them crumble when they realize the law doesn't care about their feelings or their demands. You've got this. I promise you've got this, because if I could stand up to my entire family and win, so can you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who felt entitled to what you'd earned? How did you handle it? Drop your stories in the comments, because I know I'm not alone in this, and sharing our experiences helps other people realize they're not alone either. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories about standing up to toxic family dynamics coming your way. Share this video with anyone you know who needs to hear that it's okay to protect what's yours, and that setting boundaries doesn't make you the villain. Thank you so much for listening to my story, for supporting me through the comments and likes, and for being part of this community that understands family isn't always about blood, it's about respect and love. I wish you all strong boundaries, solid documentation, and the courage to stand up for yourselves when people try to take what's yours. Stay strong, keep your receipts, and remember that you're worth fighting for.